This is my game and it looks shit. To make matters worse, it's buggy as hell. Today we're changing that, starting with these 3 steps. Adding more content, bug fixing and designing. But before we can do that, we need a plan. I want to have multiple areas divided into small rooms. An office, a kitchen, a bathroom and a storage room. But I haven't added anything for the storage room yet. I hopped into Blender and made this cabinet. It looks a bit empty, so I added some folders, which looked kind of thick. I imported both objects into Unity. Now, if you grab the red folder, the cabinet will fall over. And if you don't step aside, you will get smooshed like a tomato. With that done, we can now move on to the next step, bug fixing. As you can see, the hammer gets pushed by the door and clips right through it. But then, just one attempt later, it suddenly stays in place like nothing ever happened. I was pretty confused by this, because this behavior was so inconsistent. I've had these kinds of problems with other movement objects too, and at first I had no idea what was going on. But luckily, the fix was actually pretty simple. I just had to add a rigid body to the fridge and set it to kinematic. The same goes for the cabinet and the toilet. With everything done, we can finally move on to the last step, designing. As I mentioned before, I want multiple rooms to separate the different types of objects. So I went back into Blender and started working on an office layout. At first, it was just a rough shape, but once I had the basic structure in place, I added windows and doors to make it feel more like a real office. But when I looked at it in Unity, well, let's just say it didn't look great. Everything was plain, flat and lifeless. No surprise there, it needed some proper textures. To fix the doors and the windows, I just had to delete some stuff. For the walls, I decided to go with a drywall texture to give them a realistic look. As for the floor, I chose a carpet texture to make the space feel more like an actual office. In the kitchen, I decided to go with a marble texture to give it a more polished and high quality look. Since marble also works well in bathrooms, I used the same texture there, but with a little variation to keep things from looking too repetitive. After that, I added a glass texture to make the windows and other glass surfaces look more realistic. I also gave the frames of the windows and doors a black color to create a nice contrast and give them a more modern look. With those basics in place, it was finally time to start placing the objects in their corresponding spots. The bathroom feels quite empty, so I'll add a sink later to give it some life. The kitchen looks pretty good so far, with plenty of objects to keep things interesting. The storage area is quite small and doesn't need more than the cabinet. The office suffers from the same lack of detail as the bathroom. When I look out of the window, all I see is a void. I want the game to be set in a bustling city, not an empty space. To fix that, I added several buildings and applied detail textures to them. I also incorporated trees, a street, and some streetlights to bring the city to life. I think this really improved the overall feel of the game and added a nice touch. You can especially see the difference from the player point of view. It's not a huge change, but it gives the world a bit more character. To complete the atmosphere, I added a roof with some lights, making the space feel more finished and immersive. In the next video, I will be adding some sound design and working on a boss fight. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.